What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and after using the 2020 iPhone SE for a few weeks now, I've been thinking a lot about the different situations that people might be in when deciding to buy their next iPhone. And I think one of the more common ones is going to be people deciding to buy a phone based on a set budget instead of just paying whatever it costs to get the better hardware and more features like the iPhone 11 Pro Max, for example. So that's what brings us here today, a battle of two totally different iPhones within the same price range of $400, and those two phones are of course the iPhone SE 2020 and the iPhone 10 from 2017. So in this video we're going to be comparing the screen, the build quality, the performance, the battery life, the durability over time, and of course which one you should buy, or if you already have the iPhone 10, should you upgrade to the iPhone SE 2020. So let's kick things off with the obvious. So the iPhone SE does have a home button and bezels, whereas the iPhone 10 does not have a home button and very minimal bezels aside from that notch up top. And of course the iPhone 10 was the very first iPhone that Apple released without a home button, but if you were just to look at the front compared to like an iPhone 11 Pro, you really would not be able to tell a difference at all because the notch has remained the same all the way through until here in 2020. So you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. It still looks very modern, whereas the iPhone SE does look dated, and it looks like, people may even mistake this for the iPhone 6, which came out forever ago. So that's a big difference in terms of build quality and overall design. And when it comes to Face ID versus Touch ID with these two specifically, I prefer Touch ID just because Face ID on the iPhone 10 is rather slow, and it's definitely slower than Touch ID on the iPhone SE, which is pretty much instantaneous as you press it, whereas on the iPhone 10 you can see here it is pretty slow and it doesn't always pick up your face, especially if you have it at an angle like this, because it is that first generation Face ID. As far as the display quality, this is another major difference. We have OLED versus LCD panels. So we have the iPhone 10 over here with an 1125 by 2436 pixel resolution with a pixel density of 458 ppi, whereas the iPhone SE has a 750 by 1334 resolution with a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. And there obviously is a big difference in the video quality, the gaming quality, even the web browsing. The text is just sharper on an OLED screen. Both do have True Tone though, which is a great testament to the iPhone SE's display. It definitely makes it seem like a more higher end phone. Now we do also have the same max brightness of 625 nits on both phones, which is nice, and we have HDR10 support on both devices. So really the only thing that's different is of course the quality. Being OLED versus LCD, just naturally you're going to have a better display on the OLED panel, and that is the case here. But still, the iPhone SE screen is not bad. I mean, it's very comparable to like the iPhone XR. Of course, it's a smaller version, so it's not going to be as big as the iPhone XR, but it has the same pixel density. So it's going to be pretty much the exact same quality as the iPhone XR, which a lot of people bashed at the beginning, but nowadays you can look at it and say it's not that bad unless you're just comparing it side by side to an OLED screen. And as far as audio goes, both have stereo speakers. So we have one speaker on the bottom and one on the earpiece up top. And they both have pretty much the exact same volume levels, like max volume sounds the exact same on both. Now we do have a glass front and back on both devices, so it's pretty surprising to see a $400 phone with a glass back like we have with the iPhone SE here. However, you can see that the frame is made of aluminum versus the stainless steel frame of the iPhone 10, and you can definitely tell a difference in terms of the overall weight, and just by holding them really, you can tell a difference. The iPhone 10 does feel more premium, but the iPhone SE doesn't feel cheap. I mean, it's not even as heavy as the iPhone XR, but that glass back is really the biggest difference maker. This is what prevents it from feeling like a cheap phone. And the iPhone SE looks better on the back as well because we have that centered Apple logo with no iPhone text at the bottom, whereas the iPhone 10, the Apple logo is up top, and then we have the text of iPhone down below. So the iPhone SE does look cleaner, but overall the build quality and just the feel in the hand, the iPhone 10 is going to feel a little bit more premium. And it's also nice to know that both are IP67 water and dust resistant. I have had both of these devices in or around water, and both have been perfectly fine over time. Now, another major difference between these two is going to be with the camera setup. So we have a dual 12 megapixel camera setup on the iPhone 10 and a single firing 12 megapixel lens on the SE. And the additional lens on the iPhone 10 is a telephoto lens, which is going to allow for better portrait photos and, more importantly, portrait shots of objects, which is something that the iPhone SE unfortunately cannot do. But both can shoot video up to 4K 60 FPS, both have OIS, both have quad LED True Tone flash, HDR, and pretty much all the other goodies. But the iPhone 10 does lack the massive improvements that the A13 Bionic chip brings to the iPhone SE. And thanks to that A13 Bionic chip, the iPhone SE is going to get second generation Smart HDR, which is going to lead to much better colors and just overall better image processing, whereas the iPhone X does not even have first generation Smart HDR. We just have Auto HDR right there, which is just your standard HDR, which we see in a lot of other phones. So again, because of that Smart HDR, the colors are more vibrant and crisp on the iPhone SE, despite having the same camera as the iPhone 8, which was also released in 2017 before the iPhone X. We also get the iPhone 11 style camera application on the iPhone SE, where we can change the quality by simply tapping these numbers up top. So we can change it from 4K to 1080 and 30 to 60 FPS and things like that right here from the camera app without having to go into the actual settings, which is nice and definitely a big advantage because you cannot do that on the iPhone X. You also get features like holding down on photo to start taking a video, holding down on the shutter while you're in the photo section to start taking video, whereas on the iPhone X, you can see there it's just taking a bunch of photos at the same time and not switching over to video. Now the front-facing camera is not really good at all on either phone. We have a 7 megapixel sensor and video recording only up to 1080-30, but both can take decent portrait selfies and are definitely good enough for FaceTime calls. But again, it's nothing to write home about. It's nothing like the iPhone 11 where you can shoot 4K video from the front-facing camera, but it's not bad. The only two things I like better on the iPhone X are the ability to shoot portrait shots of objects, like I mentioned earlier, and Animoji and Memoji support. So you can see here my Animoji, and we can go over to, or the Animoji right here. You can see it can talk, mocking your face right there and smile for you and things like that, doing whatever you're doing. You could do that on the iPhone X, but you cannot do that on the iPhone SE, unfortunately. And now in terms of performance and that A13 Bionic chip inside of the 2020 iPhone SE, it is definitely faster and more efficient than the A11 Bionic chip inside of the iPhone X. And even though both have the same 3 gigabytes of RAM, I even noticed that the RAM management is better on the iPhone SE just throughout the day and doing your normal tasks like social media, email, and things like that. The iPhone SE keeps applications open in the background longer than the iPhone X, which really surprised me. So yes, the multitasking and the gaming and things like that will look better on the iPhone X given the bigger display and the better display, but the iPhone SE is a little powerhouse. I mean, this thing is going to knock out everything you throw at it with ease. I mean, let's just go ahead and open up a couple games at the same time here. Let's just go ahead and do something like PUBG, just so you can see the raw power of that A13 Bionic chip versus the A11 chip here. And it's definitely faster. It's not going to be a huge difference, in things like loading up applications, but just going out throughout the day. You can see here it did load up PUBG a few seconds before the iPhone X. Let's go ahead and do Call of Duty. Press at the same time there. We are logged into 2 separate accounts. You can see, but overall, just, using these throughout the day, the iPhone SE just handles tasks better. I mean, it goes in and out of applications faster than the iPhone X. It loads up applications faster, especially social media apps for some reason. And you can see here, even with the gaming, where you wouldn't think there'd be a huge difference, there really is. You can see there it beats it once again. And let's just go ahead and open up something like Twitter. Even something like Twitter, well, it looked like the iPhone X loaded that up there first, but just depends on what you're doing, what's running in the background. But overall, the speed of the iPhone SE, overall in general, with everything, taken into account, the iPhone SE is going to be faster than the iPhone X on a day-to-day basis. So not only is the iPhone SE going to be a little bit faster than the iPhone X, but the A13 Bionic chip inside of the iPhone SE is also going to be more efficient on the battery life. So the iPhone X has a 2716 milliamp hour battery, whereas the iPhone SE has an 1821 milliamp hour battery. So a massive difference in the size of the battery. And even though it's much larger in the iPhone X, the iPhone SE will likely get you better battery life on a daily basis. So in my battery test videos here on YouTube, if you missed those, the iPhone SE lasts about 6 hours and 12 minutes, and the iPhone X lasted about 6 hours and 2 minutes. So that's about a 10-minute difference of on-screen time. Of course, that is going to widely vary depending on your usage in a day. So do not underestimate the battery life of the iPhone SE just because it has a small 1821 milliamp hour battery, which is the same as the iPhone 8. The A13 Bionic chip is a lot more efficient. And of course, we don't have as many pixels to push on the iPhone SE as we do the iPhone X. So battery life is naturally going to be very close to each other. But I would imagine you'd get better battery life on the iPhone SE on a day-to-day basis. And of course, this also depends on the health of the battery inside. The iPhone 10 may wind up lasting longer as the iPhone SE ages and degrades, but overall the battery life is going to be very, very similar. So I would call this a draw, and that should make your decision on which one to buy a little bit easier because you don't really have to factor in one having better battery than the other. And speaking of aging, the iPhone SE will also last a little bit longer than the iPhone 10 in terms of software support from Apple. So despite both having 3 gigabytes of RAM, the processor in the iPhone SE is 2 generations newer than the one in the iPhone 10. So I would imagine that Apple would support the iPhone SE for at least 1 year longer than the iPhone 10, but probably more than that. Now, as for the pricing, the iPhone SE is of course $400 brand new for a 64 gigabyte model, and you can buy a used mint condition 64 gigabyte iPhone 10 for around $400 or even less, as you can see these listings on eBay here. So yes, the iPhone 10 was a $1,000 phone at launch a few years ago, and it's now selling for $350 to $400, sometimes even less than $350. It depends on the actual condition of the iPhone. So now that you know you can get both phones for around $400, now comes the big question. Which one should you buy? And as I always say, this comes down to personal preference and what you value more in a phone. So I'm going to break it down like this. The main reasons to get the iPhone SE are, for one, you have better camera quality and camera controls inside of the actual camera app. It's smaller and easier to use with one hand. You have the home button and Touch ID for those who prefer that over Face ID. And I do also think that it's faster overall in terms of unlocking your phone than it is with Face ID, the first generation Face ID on the iPhone 10. And you get faster performance and longer software support. Now on the flip side, the main reasons to get the iPhone 10 are, for one, you have a much better display since it is OLED, and you also have a more modern design with Face ID instead of the home button. You could take portrait photos of pets and objects where you cannot on the iPhone SE, and also the gestures make the iPhone feel more fast and fluid than actually using a home button. It feels a little bit, older and clunkier on the iPhone SE compared to the iPhone 10 with those gestures. And of course, there's also the new versus used argument to be had. So some of you guys are not comfortable buying used phones from eBay or Facebook Marketplace or anything like that, where you really shouldn't be. I mean, I did make a full video showing, things to look for and things you should do before buying a used iPhone. I will leave that linked down in the description below. It should make you feel a little bit more at ease with buying a phone on eBay. I've never been scammed on there, so that's a good video to watch. But if you are absolutely against used iPhones and eBay and things like that, and you have to buy it new, then of course the choice is obvious, since it's going to be a lot harder to find a new iPhone 10, especially for around $400 nowadays. And since people always want my personal opinion, if I only had a $400 budget for a new iPhone, I would personally go for the iPhone 10 used in mint condition, but only for 2 reasons: the screen and the dual camera setup. So yes, the iPhone SE does take better photos, but the iPhone 10 can take portrait shots of objects and pets and things like that. And that's something that I do very often. I mean, numerous times a week I do that. So that is a big, big deal for me. Also, the screen. It's the thing that we look at more than maybe anything else all day. And the screen is noticeably sharper in every area since it is OLED versus LCD. And of course, that more modern design without the home button and without the bezels. I just like bigger phones in general though. So again, it's just going to come down to personal preference and what you use or care about more in a phone. And for those of you wondering if you should upgrade from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone SE, I would probably say not to, simply because you're already used to both an OLED screen and using gestures and Face ID. It's going to feel like a step backwards unless you just really prefer the home button and Touch ID. And if you really missed that and you want to go back to that, that's really the only reason I could see you wanting to go back to the iPhone SE from the iPhone 10. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. That is a comparison of the iPhone 10 and the 2020 iPhone SE. Let me know what you guys think about the video. Do you have an iPhone 10? Do you have an iPhone SE? Or are you looking to buy one soon? Let me know which one you would buy if you had a $400 budget and had to choose just one of these 2 phones. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. And of course, make sure you guys do subscribe for a lot more comparisons coming very, very soon. And of course, iOS 14 videos coming very soon here as well. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.